Some of you say you're for women's rights, but you've been pretty quiet lately. Welcome to the Rob Lett Show. I'm your host, Rob Lett. Where are all the women? That's the focus of today's podcast. We've got a lot to unpack here today. I want to talk about what appears at least to be the slow erosion of women's rights or their appearance in the areas of sports, entertainment, in the courts, obviously in the restrooms, and even in business to a certain degree lately. So we've got a lot to talk about. But before we get started, I'd like you to go ahead and do a few things. First of all, like this video, subscribe to it. If you're on YouTube, to the upper right-hand corner, you're going to see a bell. That's a notification bell. Click it, and you'll get notified the next time we release a new show. But if you're on Rumble, to the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a share button. Click that button, and it'll share this video with a friend of yours who should have been here today. Go ahead and do all of those that apply right now. Are you paying attention to what's happening in sports? It's not in the United States, but in New Zealand recently, transgender Laurel Hubbard was announced Sportswoman of the Year by the University of Otago. It's important to note that Hubbard was knocked out of the weightlifting competition for being unable to make a successful lift. So if Hubbard didn't even win, why name Hubbard Sportswoman of the Year? Apparently it's because Hubbard made history, being the first transgender to compete in an individual event at the Tokyo Games. Long before Hubbard actually competed, however, it was pretty obvious that Hubbard was going to be the focus of the Olympic competition.
New Zealand has chosen the first transgender athlete to compete at its Olympic Games. Laurel Hubbard is a female weightlifter who will be in Tokyo next month. Supporters call her selection a breakthrough for the transgender community. It's also reignited a debate with critics who say it's unfair for an athlete who used to compete with men to participate in women's sports. MTS Taya has the story.
For the headline-making and barrier-breaking weightlifter, all she wants to do is compete.
I am who I am. I'm not here to change the world. I just want to, be me and just, do what I do.
43-year-old Laurel Hubbard, who transitioned from male to female in 2012, is considered a serious medal contender after being selected to represent her home country, New Zealand, at the Tokyo Games. Hubbard also has the backing of the International Olympic Committee. The governing body introduced transgender guidelines for athletes back in 2015. Under the rules, those who transition from male to female can compete in the women's category as long as their testosterone was kept below a certain level for at least a year. Joanna Harper, a medical physicist and competitive runner, who is also trans, helped advise the IOC on its guidelines.
Pre-transition and post-transition, did that change your ability to be a competitive athlete?
When I transitioned, within 9 months of hormone therapy, I was running 12% slower. That's the difference between serious male athletes and serious female athletes.
Is it fair?
The absolute answer to that question is still not certain. We need a lot more data before we can come to an absolute conclusion on that.
Males do have a performance advantage that's based on their biological sex. They outperform us on every single metric: speed, stamina, strength. Picking testosterone is a red herring. I mean, we're forgetting about the anatomy, the fast twitch muscle, the bigger organs.
It's a really knotty problem for the...
Very knotty question. And as we heard there, the absolute question of is it fair still really hasn't been answered yet.
Right around the same time Hubbard was being named Sportswoman of the Year in New Zealand, here in the U.S., we were witnessing what was somewhat of a fall from grace. Sha'Carri Richardson was once the American favorite to win the women's 100-meter race. That was June of this year. She was on her way to the Olympics when she was disqualified after a drug test. After the passing away of her mother, she used marijuana as a way of coping with the stress of her loss. And the controversy at the time was whether or not marijuana had somehow unfairly contributed to her performance. It's interesting to talk about the two side by side. And I just want to be clear, I'm not one of those who was arguing for Richardson to be reinstated. If she broke the rules, she broke the rules. If the legislative body would have determined that marijuana is not enough to impact her performance, then let the legislative body change the rules. That's not my concern. My concern is the medical community, who seem to imply that the only difference between men and women are our testosterone levels. Now, they claim all of the data isn't in yet, but even though all of the data isn't in yet, it apparently didn't stop Hubbard from being able to compete amongst all of the women. Separate from testosterone levels, do males' muscles tend to be larger? If you compared sport by sport, nearly all of us could name some transgender woman who dominated a female sport. It's funny how that doesn't work the other way around. At least it's never been reported the transgender man who just dominated the men's sports. Show me the transgender male who's kicking LeBron James's butt.
Don't worry, I'll wait.
Some of our traditional stories, like Cinderella, are now being rewritten, like this scene where Billy Porter plays the fairy godmother. Or have you seen anything by Lil Nas X lately, like his fake pregnancy photo shoot? Are all of these replacements of women just a coincidence, or is there a deeper message that mainstream media is trying to send? Be sure to hang around to the end of this video. At the very end, I placed a link for you to show you what the mainstream media did in our last 2 elections, and almost everybody missed it. But I digress. Are you paying attention to what's happening in the courts? This year, under Governor Gavin Newsom, a new California law allows transgender inmates to pick and choose whatever gender they want to be. Newsom needs to halt transgender mixing of prison populations, women advocates say. A California law allowing transgender inmates to pick the prison gender of their choice has come under fire from a women's rights group citing abuse of females by men. In a letter to Governor Gavin Newsom, the Women's Liberation Front accused the state of violating the constitutional rights of incarcerated women by allowing men into their living quarters to prey on women. And the outcome of this law was so predictable. The amount of sexual assaults against women increased due to women being housed in the exact same cell as men. If a man has to serve prison time anyway, what man in his right mind is going to allow himself to be transferred to a men's prison when all he has to do is claim to be transgender and serve out the rest of his time in a women's prison? Are you paying attention to what's already been happening in women's restrooms? After alleged sexual assault, officials open investigation of transgender bathroom policy. The Education Department is investigating whether a Georgia school system's transgender bathroom policy, which permits students to use bathrooms that align with their gender identity, played any role in the young girl's alleged sexual assault. Transgender activists pretend that these type of events don't even occur, but they're actually far more common than we've been led to believe. Of course, there are plenty of these unsafe occurrences that happen right now, but I've pulled a few from the past to show you the type of conflicts that the general public ran into when the laws first went into effect. There was that time in Ammon, Idaho, when a biological male claiming to be a woman was arrested after taking cell phone pictures of a woman in the adjoining stall of the women's restroom at a Target store. The man, who was dressed as a woman, ran out of the store after the victim attempted to confront him. Or that time in Washington, D.C., when a female security guard who worked at a grocery store was arrested for removing a male from the women's restroom after he entered dressed as a woman. When the security guard asked the man to leave, he refused, saying he identified as a woman. The security guard physically removed the man from the women's restroom. The man called the police on the security guard upon leaving the store. Then there was that time in Mesquite, Texas. In May of 2016, a woman was in a Ross department store dressing room when she heard a man's voice in the dressing room. She reported this to the manager, who informed the woman that, despite the man being dressed as a male and having 5 o'clock shadow, the man was representing himself as a woman today, quote unquote. The Ross manager informed the woman that if she was bothered by this, she would need to wait until he was finished. I could go on and on if I wanted to, and these don't even touch on the areas of sexual assault that I'm certain have arisen out of situations like this. Maybe I'm old school. When I was a kid, I was a Cub Scout, and as I got older, I was a Boy Scout, and I had absolutely no problem with girls being a Girl Scout. I got it. Right off the Girl Scouts website, it says, research shows that girls learn best in an all-girl, girl-led, and girl-friendly environment. Now, ladies, you have to tell me, is that a sales pitch or is that the truth? The reason I'm asking is because I'm seeing in society just the opposite of what the Girl Scouts tell me. I'm not seeing females leading the way much anymore. I mean, are you paying attention to what's already happened in retail stores? There once was a time in the store where you'd almost expect a woman to help you out in the cosmetics department or in women's fashions, perfume. But those days of women leading other women are starting to fade. Today, women are more likely to be given advice about their makeup from a man.
Just gonna grab my little fluffy brush and dip into contour number 1. Yeah, it's looking fine, to be honest.
Today, women are more likely to be given advice about their fashion sense from a man. And I couldn't find it this time, but I could have sworn I saw a video of a bunch of women signing up for this class on how to be more ladylike that was being taught by some guy. So ladies, help me out here, because it would appear that all of the issues that you fought for, having a job, starting organizations for women, having some degree of safety in an environment, are all slowly being eroded by men. Am I wrong on this? Let me know in the comments section. And if I'm right, where are the protests like I saw in the 60s? Where are the marches? Where are the women banding together to get some new laws passed? Again, locking a man in a cell with a woman for 20 years is about as extreme as it gets, but I don't recall any female politicians screaming about this at the top of their lungs. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. Well, we'll never get it all, but we did unpack a little bit. In this episode, we touched on a few things that are slowly eroding at women's rights and organizations in the areas of sports, entertainment, in the areas of the courts, restrooms, and even day-to-day business. Make sure you stick around for our next podcast, Exposing the Last 2 Elections, because some of you think I'm talking about how Democrats cheated Republicans. Nope. To your left is how Democrats actually cheated Democrats in our last 2 elections. To your right is our latest show. Click either one to go there right now. I don't know who said this quote, but it's a perfect way to conclude today's podcast. Quick reminder that freedom is being you without asking permission. I'm Rob Lett, and I approve this message.